In a time when so many Americans felt forgotten, an unexpected glimmer of hope arrived in the form of a historic announcement. The clock was ticking, and a sense of urgency flooded the air. Congress, after what seemed like endless years of negotiations, had just passed a game-changing bill that would forever alter the financial landscape for millions of Americans who had long struggled. This wasn't just another round of temporary relief, it was something far more profound. The announcement, a $5,000 lifetime aid package for Social Security and disability recipients, hit like a tidal wave. For those on the brink, the news felt almost too good to be true. It wasn't just a small check, it was a lifeline, a guarantee that the hardships they faced would ease, at least for a while. But there was a catch. Only 20 states were eligible, and the clock was ticking on applications. As the details unfolded, the reality began to sink in. For too long, those who had contributed to Social Security had been left with nothing but an inadequate safety net, stretched thin by rising costs. Many had felt abandoned by a system that promised so much, only to deliver far too little. For years, they had watched as others prospered, wondering when it would be their turn. But now, with the stroke of a pen, everything was different. The federal government had recognized the strain on the lives of Social Security and disability recipients and had decided to take a significant step toward ensuring that these individuals wouldn't be left behind. The $5,000 lifetime aid wasn't a temporary fix, it was a permanent change. But with the good news came a flood of questions. Would their state be one of the lucky 20 to be included? How would they know if they qualified? And most importantly, what steps did they need to take to make sure they didn't miss out on this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity? In every corner of the nation, people began to check the list, hoping that their home state was included. From California to Florida, from Texas to New York, the 20 eligible states would be the key to a brighter future for those who had long lived under the shadow of financial uncertainty. But there was no time to waste. The application process would be tight, and the chances of missing out were high. For many, the thought of applying felt like a final shot at stability. People had waited for a moment like this for years, but they also feared that the moment would pass them by. Applications would be rushed, overwhelmed by a wave of people all trying to secure their piece of the relief. The anxiety of missing out loomed over everyone. As word spread about the $5,000 lifetime aid, the phone lines were overwhelmed. People who had never thought twice about their eligibility suddenly found themselves making calls, checking websites, trying to decipher the complicated process. The more they learned, the more they understood, this wasn't a check they could just wait for in the mail. They had to act fast. They had to be one of the first to apply, or they risked falling through the cracks. It was a pivotal moment. A moment that could change everything for millions of families. For years, families had lived in the constant stress of wondering how they would pay the bills or make it through another month. And now, finally, there was a chance for them to breathe. To plan. To have hope that the future could be different. But what if they didn't qualify? What if their state wasn't one of the lucky 20? The thought was terrifying. For some, the $5,000 lifetime aid was their only hope for peace of mind. If they missed it, it meant more of the same, the endless cycle of struggle, uncertainty, and sacrifice. It meant another round of paying bills late, rationing food, and wondering if they would be able to afford the medical care they needed. Yet, despite the fear, there was still a glimmer of optimism. For many, the knowledge that they weren't alone in this fight, that they had the opportunity to secure this relief, felt empowering. They weren't the forgotten ones anymore. The government had heard their cries. The system was finally acknowledging the hardships they had endured for years. And for the first time in a long while, people began to believe in a future where they weren't just surviving, they were thriving. The next steps were clear: check if your state is on the list, gather the necessary paperwork, and apply before the deadline. The clock was ticking, and there was no time to waste. For those who were eligible, this was their moment to claim the financial security they had long been denied. For those who weren't, the fight wasn't over yet. They knew that change was possible, that the system could evolve to meet the needs of its people. But for now, the focus was on the present. On the relief that was finally within reach. On the hope that had once seemed so distant but was now a tangible reality. The $5,000 lifetime aid was not just a financial relief, it was a turning point. It was a promise that, no matter how difficult the past had been, the future could be better. For those who were willing to take the first step and claim what was rightfully theirs, the possibility of a brighter tomorrow was closer than ever. As the deadline for applications loomed closer, an overwhelming sense of anticipation filled the air. Across the nation, families gathered around their phones and computers, anxiously checking the list of eligible states. There was a collective sense of urgency, as if the $5,000 lifetime aid was their one chance to escape the unrelenting grip of financial strain. In cities, towns, and rural communities, the story was the same. For years, these families had lived paycheck to paycheck, each month a delicate balancing act of bills, groceries, and the overwhelming worry of what would happen if an emergency arose. For them, the $5,000 wasn't just a sum of money, it was the difference between despair and hope. Take Lucy, a single mother from Alabama, for example. She had spent her life working multiple jobs, trying to provide for her two young children. The struggles of keeping food on the table, ensuring they had clothes for school, and trying to pay the rent each month had taken its toll. There had been no room for extras. No room for vacations, for a night out, for any kind of luxury. For Lucy, it was survival, pure and simple. When the news about the $5,000 lifetime aid broke, Lucy had been skeptical. She had heard it all before, promises from politicians, empty words about relief and change. But as she listened to the announcement, a flicker of hope ignited inside her. The moment she saw that Alabama was on the list of eligible states, she knew she had to act fast. This was different. This wasn't just a temporary payment, it was something that could fundamentally change the trajectory of her life and her children's future. Her phone became her lifeline. For hours, she searched through the application process, ensuring she had everything she needed. The anxiety was palpable as she filled out the forms, double-checking her details, her eligibility. She knew that if she missed this, it would be months, if not years, before anything like it came again. The same urgency filled homes across the country. People were on the phone with representatives, sifting through websites, navigating through complex eligibility requirements, all with the same goal in mind, to get that relief. But not everyone was as fortunate. Some found that their states had been left off the list. They had done everything right, filled out the forms, followed the steps, but the state they called home wasn't one of the 20 chosen. The bitter disappointment that followed was almost tangible. There was no financial lifeline to grab onto. The feeling of being overlooked, left behind once again, was crushing. For those left out, it was another blow in a long line of missed opportunities. But for others like Lucy, the application process had a different outcome. As she hit submit on her application, her heart raced. She'd done it. She'd secured the chance to change her future. A sense of relief washed over her, but even that was tinged with apprehension. What if it wasn't enough? What if it didn't come through? In the days that followed, the weight of waiting settled in. She was constantly checking her email, refreshing the page, desperate for confirmation that the relief was truly on its way. Every email, every phone call seemed to heighten the tension, and she found herself holding her breath, hoping the next one would be the one that brought the news she so desperately needed. And then, one morning, it came. The email she had been waiting for. The confirmation that she had been approved. The $5,000 lifetime aid was hers. The relief was overwhelming. Tears filled her eyes as she read the message again, not believing it at first. But it was real. The money was coming, and with it, a promise of stability that she hadn't felt in years. The significance of the moment wasn't just financial, it was emotional. For the first time in so long, Lucy could breathe. She could finally see a future for her children where they didn't have to worry about food, about rent, about whether or not they would have the things they needed to thrive. It wasn't perfect. There were still challenges ahead, but this was a step in the right direction. For her, and for thousands of others like her, the $5,000 lifetime aid wasn't just a handout, it was a sign that the system had finally heard their cries. It was a glimpse into a future where they could be more than just survivors. They could be participants in the American dream, not left behind, not forgotten. But the journey wasn't over yet. For those who had qualified, the challenge now was to make sure the aid reached them. There were still obstacles to overcome, bureaucratic delays, misunderstandings, and questions about how the money would be distributed. The system was not perfect, and not everyone would get their share right away. But for those who had received the confirmation, there was hope. And as families like Lucy's began to prepare for the relief they had been waiting for, the reality of what had happened began to sink in. The $5,000 lifetime aid had been more than just a financial gift, it was the beginning of a new chapter for those who had been forgotten for far too long. It was a promise that their struggles mattered. And as they moved forward, they knew that this wasn't the end, it was only the beginning of a fight for more, for a future where they weren't just scraping by, but thriving.